when we were looking for speakers to invite for this event, we were very keen to find those who are not only interpreting contemporary realities, but those who are molding the shape of the future to come. And so it's with great pleasure that I invite JustinHall-Tipping, and we're starting this festival with him. Justin is a man whose imagination does not take no for an answer. He's someone who believes that if you question the notion of the normal, extraordinary things can happen. In our time, when the progress of man has become, is leaving a footprint more than the earth can bear, the biggest questions are about power and energy. How are we going to generate it? Who's going to produce it? The consequences and costs of using it. Justin, that's where Justin comes in, because when he saw iceberg the size of Connecticut falling into the ocean, he began to think of climate change in very serious ways. As a venture capitalist, he started a company called Nanotechnology, Nano Holdings, which began to fund research in nanotechnology. In many ways, the search for free energy and through nanotechnology is in an infant state as, say, computers were in the 1950s. So you can imagine how much untapped potential there is in it. Justin believes that we can get energy out of our window panes. And if that sounds like a lot of bunkum, we must remember that mobile phones seemed like sci-fi barely 15 years ago. The study of atoms may seem very far away from our lives, but that is why Justin is here, not only to share its excitements, but to tell us why it is one of the most urgent pursuits of our time. Justin.
Thank you. A morning in 1909, a day rather like this, my granddad was asleep in bed, and he was woken very quickly by his parents to take him down the road from where they lived in Dover, England, to see Louis Blériot, who had just landed after he flew across the English Channel. He flew 22 miles in 36 minutes. My granddad went and stood right next to this. Only 60 years later, my granddad was sitting in his TV room watching man's first footstep on the moon, real live black and white images being beamed back from a distant planet. As incredible as that is, the guys flew in a craft that looked like this and actually got there. Now, the wall of this spacecraft is as thin as a Coke can. How incredible it must have seemed to him watching that. And every generation thinks it lives in the most incredible of times. Things happen that are seemingly impossible only a decade or two earlier. And yet, you'd think with our knowledge and our understanding that every generation is dependent on this for our daily survival, that we wouldn't suddenly now find ourselves in a position where we're literally destroying the only place that we have. It's not as if we don't know what the problems are. We've known them for some time. What is it that stops us taking real change? Something always seems to stop us. Why? I was sitting at my desk, 2000 in March, when I read about the B-15 iceberg that broke off the Ross Ice Shelf, that's the bottom part in the Antarctica. And this is what it said in the article. It said it was all part of some normal process. A little bit further on in the article, it said a loss that would normally take the ice shelf 50 to 100 years to replace. That same word, normal, had now two different, almost opposite meanings. if when we leave here today to get coffee and we bump into the B-15 iceberg just outside this room, we're going to bump into something that is 1,000 feet tall, 76 miles long, 17 miles wide, and it'll weigh 2 gigatons. And I'm sorry, there's nothing normal about this. And yet I think it's this perspective that we have as humans to look at everything in our world through a lens of normal is one of the things that stops us taking real change when we need to. Only 90 days after the B-15 iceberg broke up, arguably the greatest discovery of the last century occurred. It was the sequencing, for the first time in history, of the human genome. Now, this is the stuff that's in every single one of our 50 trillion cells that makes us who we are, and more importantly, what we are. So if we just took from anybody 1 cell's worth of this code and stretched it out, it would be about 1 meter long. It would be 2 nanometers wide. 2 nanometers. 2 nanometers is 20 hydrogen atoms in a line. And when I saw that, I wondered, what if the answer to some of our biggest problems could be found in the smallest of places, where the difference between what is valuable and what is worthless is merely the addition or subtraction of just a couple of atoms. So I started to go around the world looking for the best and brightest scientists I could find at universities, because they think in the right way, whose collective discoveries have the chance to take us there and solve these problems. We formed this company called Nano Holdings to fund their extraordinary ideas so that we can stop burning up our world. Because actually, we do this rather well. We've been doing this rather well for a couple of 100 years, in particular, to be burning coal to generate our electricity. Now, the byproduct of burning coal to generate electricity, other than the stuff that comes up the chimney, is the stuff that comes out the bottom. And the stuff that comes out of the bottom is this. This is fly ash. There's a lot of fly ash that comes out the bottom. And what we do with this fly ash the world over is we take it out in trucks to fields and dump it, whereupon the wind can pick it up and blow it all around, as it does. And if we choose not to put it in a dump and try and dig a deeper hole, that deeper hole sometimes breaks out and it goes into our aquifer. It doesn't look very pretty when it gets into our water supply. Aside from not looking very good, what's in it that you can't see is what we should be worried about. You may not recognize a lot of these names, but things that usually end in IUM aren't really any good. It's not a problem that anyone is immune from. Millions of metric tons of this stuff are produced. It's a problem that needs resolving. Another industry that has an effluent almost as bad is the cement industry. 5% of the world's CO2 emissions comes from making cement. For every ton of cement we make, we release 1 ton of CO2 into the atmosphere. And that process has largely not changed since Roman times. If you look at the plant that cement is made in, it looks awfully like a coal-burning plant. Stuff's coming out the top and stuff's coming out the bottom. 2 professors at university in Florida and Imperial College London, Sudipta Seal and Professor Larry Hench, looked at what fly ash is at the very, very small scale. And it looks like this, little ball bearings, except these ball bearings are mostly aluminum silicates. Aluminum silicates are incredibly strong. And what they thought with nanotechnology, could they like rough up the edges of these spherical balls with a sol gel chemistry? Because if you could do that, maybe they would click together like Lego blocks. And if they clicked together like Lego blocks at the very, very small, those bonds would be incredibly strong. And if those bonds were strong, what you would actually make is cement. So they've managed to take fly ash, a byproduct of burning coal, change it chemically at the atomic scale, make an environmentally friendly concrete out of a waste product of burning coal, and in the process release no CO2 whatsoever. This is the state of an industry where everything that you thought you knew, you can just throw out the window and think about it differently. And what if we could think of the rest of energy in the same kind of way? Think of where we are in a room. Most of these rooms are where we live and where we work. And if you think about the tremendous amount of energy that is coming into this room, it typically comes in from the sun when it chooses to. It comes in from the sun and it brings light and it brings heat into the room, which typically, if you're in the middle of summer, you're trying to keep cool. And in the winter, exactly the opposite is happening. You've got heat in the room that's trying to get out through the window because it's cold outside and the heat is being drawn outside. Wouldn't it be really good if we could somehow modulate how much light and heat is moving in through a room? Because this is about where 40% of the world's energy goes, is in our caves, however nice they are or however unnice they are. But we have to live in a certain temperature. It would be really great if we could somehow manipulate what happens. One of the things that can do that is a form of carbon that is made in this incredibly beautiful reaction, where we take graphite, we dump it into a plasma furnace at a very high temperature to vaporize it, and when it coalesces back into its carbonaceous form, it changes into chicken wire looking carbon rolled up with a slight twist. Except this chicken wire is 100,000 times smaller than the width of a single hair, and it's 1,000 times more conductive than copper. 1,000 times more conductive than copper? How can that be? One of the weird things about the nanoscale is that materials look and act very differently. You know carbon as the black piece in the pencil, carbon being black. In this format, carbon is totally transparent and flexible. And when you combine that with a polymer and stick it on your window, apply a 2 millivolt pulse to it, it will change its state between colored, i.e. reflecting away light and heat, or transparent, letting all light and heat through, and any combination in between. Now, as we were working on this, we were suggested to go see a different professor at the university who was working on something entirely different. His issue that he wanted to solve was, what if you could turn off lights? Turn off artificial lighting. What would the power savings to us all if we could go and pull that stunt off? Well, the first thing we would have to do is see at night, which we don't. This makes you do it. I have to be very careful with these because I've dropped one of these before. This is a thin film, totally new device using nanotechnology to change what happens at night. Because you see, at night, there's a tremendous amount of light, infrared, but our eyes just can't see it. Let me show you how this works. Firstly, it's called near vision, NIR for near infrared vision. To give you a sense of its perspective in comparison to a battery, the thing on the left is a normal camera lens that I'm going to use to stick on this side so I can film what you're about to see. I just want to tell you the parts. There are two parts in this, laid down essentially by spray painting. The first part is the thing that's happening on this side. You have infrared radiation coming in, it hits the plate. That infrared radiation is immediately turned into an electron, which then bops over to the display, which is on the back side, and is presented as a photon to my eye. And in the magic part, okay, the whole device is half a micron thick. Half a micron is 300 times smaller than a decimal place. So this is what that camera looks through, just to show you first the transparency. Now you turn the lights off. Sorry. You see an image of remarkable clarity showing you feature sets that you normally wouldn't see. So we've talked about being able to generate energy. We've talked about being able to use it differently. One of the things, if you really want to change the world rapidly, is you want to store energy. And this is the best storage mechanism that the world uses in terms of the one thing we care about, dollars per watt stored. There's nothing better than a lead-acid battery that was invented 150 years ago in France. That's the best we got. And if you wanted to have power storage in your house, you'd need a rack of these in every house. I'm not sure we've really progressed this part of the equation. So we drew a diagram. We were sitting in a diner outside Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. And that's the diagram I drew on a napkin. The professor who was sitting there was Professor Bruce Gennade, who was running the energy program at UT Dallas. And I said, "Can you go make that?" And instead of being laughed out of the diner, he said, "Yeah, we'll go try to make that." $80,000 later, we have eBox. And eBox is testing new nanomaterials such that we can be able to park an electron on the outside of a surface, hold it until we need it, and then be able to release it on command to be taken anywhere. When you combine these puzzle pieces and others like them, it opens up the possibility for energy stored in my location, if I don't need it, being able to be taken up to my window and turned back into light and transmitted to your location. And for that, I do not need an electricity grid between us. Ladies and gentlemen, the electricity grid of tomorrow is no grid. And energy will one day be free. Now, I know some of you are sitting there saying this is not going to be normal. Just as it wasn't normal for our parents and grandparents to conceive of a time when a long-distance telephone call would be free, when it wasn't normal to have a telephone called a cellular phone with no wire. And even stranger than that, it certainly would not be ever thought by our parents and grandparents as normal to be able to watch that, which we need to move from. When you combine these puzzle pieces, it opens up the prospect of being able to deliver one of the last real key issues, which is water. We're running out of water. The day that we do, we're going to have to grab all the water from the sea and convert it into something that we can drink. And for that, we're going to have to build desalination plants. And for us to build desalination plants for each of us, just for what we need as a human, each day, it's just 8 glasses of that. Now that doesn't seem much of a problem to go solve. That's it? 8 glasses of this is all we've got to solve for? But it'll cost us $19 trillion to do that for each one of us. And $19 trillion is a line of dollar bills from here to the moon and back. Oh, of course, I forgot, those things need energy to run. To run them, it'll take twice the known supply of oil in the world, and in doing so, burn up our planet even faster. We're simply not going to be able to do that. In 13 years, about 2/3 of the world is going to be under water stress. This cannot be our new normal. It cannot. Food, energy, and water are the basic needs of each and every one of us. This should be the human Bill of Rights, available to all. In our rapacious need for more, we are already using 1.5 planets worth of resources. And China is accelerating rapidly. Question is, what's going to happen to India? Is it going to do the unexpected? Let me show you what unexpected looks like. We've got 1 billion of these in the world. That's a lot, 1 billion of them. They're all using an internal combustion engine. An internal combustion engine is about 30% efficient. Maybe we should say that sentence around the other way. The internal combustion engine is 70% inefficient. And we have 1 billion of them. Everybody knows that fuel cells are really good. Really good means 80 to 90% efficient. But we don't have, maybe we should have a show of hands. How many people have a fuel cell in their car? Right? I don't either. Let me tell you why. A fuel cell works really on a couple of principles, and one is a pretty key one. There are 2 electrodes, and on one electrode, the cathode, is a material called platinum. Platinum is an expensive material. We mine it up. It's like gold, but costs more. Platinum is the catalyst that makes the fuel cell go. And if I have platinum on a catalyst, let's say this is my catalyst, it looks like salt spread all over. When I fire up that fuel cell, that salt, the platinum, tries to migrate to the center of the cathode, whereupon it's polluted by carbon monoxide. And every once in a while, you've got to pull the whole thing apart, take out the cathode, put another one in. You take this cathode and you try and reclaim the platinum, which is why we don't have fuel cells with platinum and cathodes, because you're not doing it, nor am I, anytime soon. in the world of the unexpected. Do you remember I talked about Professor Rinsler? Communal garden, well, it's not really, it's special nanocarbon, but nevertheless. One of his students said, I wonder what would happen if we took this membrane coated in the single-wall carbon nanotube with that twist that's 1,000 times more conductive than copper, 100,000 times smaller than a hair on your head, and stick it into the fuel cell right where the platinum cathode would have gone, and turn it on. What they saw is the blue line, which is this, in comparison to the red line, which is platinum. More surprisingly, there was no degradation in the carbon, whereas the platinum degrades. We weren't even doing an experiment looking for this. In the unexpected, somebody said, what the heck, why don't we try? That ought to apply to us more often, I think. Because you see, we live in a rather unique neighborhood. A unique neighborhood that our power source delivers us 10,000 times more power every moment of every day than the world consumes. 10,000, that sounds like a lot. I want to sort of translate into something that we can really get our hands around. We've got a car, most of us. So I just want you to imagine we have a bridge between the Earth and the Sun. And this bridge is 2 miles wide. It's 1 mile tall, this road, 2 miles wide, 1 mile tall, all the way from here to the Sun, and it's made of ice. And we get in our car, and we're going to drive 65 miles an hour, because we're going to have the speed limit on this. We won't stop for coffee. We won't stop for going to sleep. We'll just drive, caffeinated out, from here to the Sun. It will take us, roughly, 168 years to get there. But we'll get there. So on this 168-year-long road, 2 miles wide, 1 mile deep of ice. The Sun would vaporize that road in 1 second. 1 second. That's an amazing amount of power. Our attempts at radical energy innovation are in the very baby of tiny of baby steps. What if India decided to make an example for the world? Not take the shortcut like the rest of us, certainly not the shortcut, and instead really learned how to harness that kind of energy. That'd make you think. Thank you.